everybody. So today's lesson 3.8, is on operant conditioning. And this is different than classical conditioning, and I think you'll see why it's different. So in classical conditioning, we talked about how that was all about association. In this one, it's all about behavior creates consequence. And so let's dive right in. So the first thing you need to know are the learning objectives of this video. So you need to be able to describe how operant conditioning works. We're going to talk about two scientists. We're going to talk about Thorndike and B.F. Skinner and how this theory came about. We're going to look at positive and negative reinforcement as well as positive and negative punishment and what those mean. And we're going to talk about reinforcement schedules. So let's take a look and dive right in. So let's first talk about what is operant conditioning. So if you remember, I said that when you're talking about classical conditioning, that was really all about association. So the dog associated his food with hunger, and so he drooled. And Pavlov showed that you can change the association so that the animal, including humans, change what they associate the behavior with. And so he created dogs that salivated at the sound of the bell. So in operant conditioning, it's a little bit different. In this case, we're looking at action and the consequence, and we're going to do something in the middle here where we change basically the behavior. We're either going to increase behavior that we want, or we are going to decrease behavior that we don't want. So the term operant comes from the idea that behavior operates on the environment to produce rewarding or punishing stimuli. And that is where that terminology comes from. So let's keep going. Let's talk about Edward Thorndike. Now, he came up with a theory that I have to laugh. I think it's a little bit like, well, duh, but he's the first guy that actually put it down into words, and he backed it with empirical evidence or research. So what he did, and these slides are on Canvas, so you can click this picture and it will show you a video of a cat actually doing the experiment that Thorndike did. And this was in the late 1800s, about 1898 to about 1902. He would create this maze, and the cats had to do certain activity or certain behavior in order to open a door, and then if they were able to open the door, they would receive a reinforcement. In this case, it was food. Now, he showed this in a graph. Here's a graph. Trials are on the bottom. Okay, so the cats went through this multiple times, and he timed how long it took them to escape this box. And as you can see, the time it took got quite a bit shorter over the trials because the cat is learning how to escape. And so the behavior is repeated, the learning occurs, and basically the experiment is successful. So he came up with something called the law of effect. And the law of effect basically states if a behavior is rewarded in some way, whether it's food or accolades or affirmation, that behavior is going to be repeated. However, if a behavior is punished or has a negative outcome, then they are less likely to occur. Like I said, that's kind of duh, but he's the first person to put it kind of into words. And so with this in mind, B.F. Skinner took this information, and in the mid-1900s to about 1960, 1970, he actually started working on operant conditioning. So he used rats and pigeons mainly, and he created these things called operant chambers. Nowadays, you'll probably hear them referred as Skinner boxes. And there's a picture of one right here. There's also, like I said in the video or earlier, if you go on Canvas and open the slides, you can click to see this pigeon actually being experimented on. But he basically trained pigeons to peck at a screen at a certain color or shape. And if they did it correctly, then they would get a reward. Now, there was no punishment involved in this. It was all positive reinforcement. And the pigeons learned very quickly to peck at the one that gave them the food. Same thing with rats. He would have rats press certain levers or buttons in order to get the food. And so that food is the positive reinforcement for the behavior that you want to have happen. And this is, if you've ever heard of homing pigeons, if I had one, I could take it with me somewhere and let it go, and it would always fly home. And this is how they trained them, is through this operant conditioning and positive reinforcement. Now, it's important to note that the terminology of operant conditioning is quite different than what we use the terminology for today. So I want to make sure you guys get this. So let's first start with the term positive, okay? Positive, I'm going to use blue because I like the color blue. Positive does not mean that it's good, okay? So I'm not saying a positive reinforcement is a good reinforcement, okay? You need to get that out of your mind. What it means is I'm adding something to the environment. So I'm adding something to increase behavior. If I say something is negative, I'm not saying it's bad, okay? What I'm saying is I'm removing something from the environment. That does not mean bad, it just means I'm taking something away to change behavior. Reinforcement, on the other hand, is used in order to increase behavior that you want. So you're going to increase the likelihood that that behavior will continue. And then punishment is what we use in order to decrease occurrences of the behavior. So the more I punish something, the less likely it is to recur. So let's do some examples together and see if we can put this terminology together in a way that makes sense for this theme. So we're going to start, remember, the first thing you have to do is determine was something added or was something removed? Is it reinforcement or is it punishment? Okay, do we want the behavior to continue or do we want the behavior to get less? So let's start with the first one. Imagine I've got my boys at home and I say to one of them, if you keep kicking your brother, you won't get dessert. So the first thing is, was something removed? Yes, I'm removing dessert. Okay, so this is already negative. So I'm removing dessert. Now, is it because I want a behavior to continue or to stop? Well, I want him to stop kicking his brother. Okay, so that's going to be punishment. So this is a negative punishment. Now let's look at the next one. If you keep kicking your brother, I'll put you in timeout. Okay, so I'm adding something here undesirable. This child does not want to go into timeout. And I'm doing this in order to decrease the occurrence of him kicking his brother. So this is still punishment. This is called positive punishment. Now let's look at the next one. When they stop kicking, if you stop kicking, you don't have to eat your peas because the kid doesn't like the peas, but I want him to stop kicking his brother. So I'm taking away the peas, so that's negative because I'm taking something away, and I want the behavior to stop. I want him to stop kicking his brother, so that is like the first one, negative punishment. Now let's look at the last one. If you eat all your peas, you can also have dessert. So notice I have added something. I'm adding dessert. And why am I adding it? Because I want to increase the likelihood that they will eat their peas. So this is positive reinforcement. Okay, so always, whenever you have an operant conditioning question, start with, is something added or taken away? And then do you want the behavior to continue or to stop? All right, now let's look at some primary reinforcers. These are things that we are born with. So these are innately rewarding stimuli. Food is a fantastic example. All right, and this is, think about if you get hungry, you have hunger pains, you want the hunger pains to go away, so you add food. So that would be a positive punishment. I think that's right, yeah, because you're adding something in order to get rid of the hunger, okay? Water, shelter, sleep, these are all innately rewarding stimuli. Now, on the other hand, what you are probably more familiar with are what we call secondary reinforcers. Now, secondary reinforcers are interesting because they combine, you're basically combining operant and classical conditioning, because the operant conditioning happens in that you're still reinforcing or punishing. You're still using positive and negative. You're adding or taking something away, but you're doing this in order to get something else. And so the association piece of classical conditioning is here. So think about grades at Kent, okay? I want you to learn this material. And in order to get you to study, I am going to give you an A if you study. So now I want a certain behavior to continue, which is learning. And in order to do that, I will give you an A. I've added grades as an incentive. So that is a positive reinforcement. Now, what do grades actually mean? Those are not innately rewarding. Grades are just kind of ephemeris. They don't really mean anything. But in our society, we kind of represent grades to mean success. And so there's an association there that comes from classical conditioning. Another great example would be sticker charts. Let's say I have a student who is, I'm in elementary school and there's a child who has like some discipline behaviors. So for every day that he does not pinch someone or punch someone, he gets a sticker on his chart. And with a certain amount of stickers, he will then get a reward. So you can see that this is, the food is actually, the dessert is actually the motivator, but I'm using a secondary reinforcer, which is the sticker chart. So just know that those are available. Now, this is kind of an important topic. I'm going to talk now just about reinforcement, not about punishment. So if I want a behavior to continue, you can use scheduling of reinforcement to make it even better, okay? Now we have two different things here. So let's look at this first box. We have fixed interval. Okay, so I'm putting these two together. What does fixed interval mean? Well, an interval is time. So I'm going to put interval equals time, all right? And a fixed time period is obviously what it says. So for example, I get paid one time per month for the work that I do, all right? It doesn't matter how many, I'm on a salary, it doesn't matter how many days I actually work, I get paid the same time of the month every month. That is a fixed interval. It is based on time, month, and it can have benefits in that, like, I know I'm going to get paid, so I don't have to worry, but sometimes it can be demotivating, right? Like, I may not work as hard because I know I'm going to get paid. Another example of this might be you give yourself a new set of clothes, or let's say a new, I don't know, a new book for every 3 times you go to the gym in a week. So if I go to the gym 3 times a week, the week is the time interval, I'm going to give myself a new book. So that's my reinforcement, all right? Those are examples of one type. Another type you can have is variable interval. These are not as common, but it could be something like, I'm trying to think, in the next month, that doesn't even work. I'm trying to think of a good example. These are not as common, so it's kind of hard to think of an example. Let's say that I get paid by my boss, and it's not on a set interval. So I get paid under the table maybe. A great example of this might be getting tips, right? It's variable. I don't know how many tips I'm going to make, but if I work more hours, I'll probably get more tips. And so it's not very good for actually motivating people for behavior, because if you don't know why you're getting it, it's kind of hard to be motivated about it. So the next one is a fixed ratio. And in this one, a ratio has to do with the number of times the behavior is done. That's what ratio means, right? So think about, let's say I work for a political party and I'm stuffing envelopes, and every 200 envelopes, I'm going to get paid $100. So let me put this on here, $100. Okay, so that's a fixed ratio of reinforcement. Now again, this can be good because I know exactly what I need to do, but after I do those 200 envelopes, I might be like, oh, now I have to do a whole nother 200 in order to get paid. I may not have the motivation to keep going. So the motivation is high as you get closer to the pay, but the motivation starts to wane at the beginning of the ratio. Now, the next one is a variable ratio. This one is really interesting. So at a variable or unknown amount of times that the behavior is done, I'll call it behavior, I don't know, behavior, I'm just going to say behavior done, then you get a reward. And the best example of this is slot machines. Okay, so think about slot machines. I can go to Las Vegas and I can pull the arm down on a slot machine. I can pull it down once and win. I can pull it down 200 times and not win. I can pull it down 3 times and not win, 15 times and not win. And if you remember gambler's fallacy, we always think, oh, I'm due for a win. That is absolutely not true. It's variable. And this one right here is very important to remember, this one, because this is the best, which is surprising, but it is the best to change behavior. This actually creates addiction. Okay, and we're going to talk about why that is in class, but basically, this works really well to increase the behavior that you want. The last thing I want to talk about, and I promise this is it, I know this has been a long video, but this is an important topic, is a token economy. This just it's very much a secondary reinforcer idea. If you've ever been to a dentist, you're given like a little wooden coin that has no meaning whatsoever. You can't use it anywhere, but if you gain enough of them, you can exchange it for like a gift card. Another great example of this is what credit cards do. Use the credit card, you get points. Those points mean nothing until you have enough of them, and then you can exchange them. So that's a token economy, very much what our world works on. Pay is a great example. So I hope that this works for you. That is it for today. Have a fantastic day. Sorry this video was so long. Thanks, everybody.